let me do a quick intro. Again, I'm Brett from the Opt Health team, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today for the session. And with me, as you could see from our Opt Medical team, we have one of our co-founders, Dr. Graham Simpson, a South African trained physician, board certified in internal emergency and age management medicine, and a founding member of the American Holistic Medical Association. Dr. Graham has spent over 2 decades pioneering proactive inflammation-focused approaches to cardiometabolic disease, has also authored over a dozen books, including The 4-Week Diabesity Cure, and leads the clinical centers dedicated to reversing diabesity through diet, hormone optimization, and lifestyle medicine. So before we really dive into things with Graham, I do have a short video to play that should help familiarize you guys a little bit with Graham's approach. So bear with me while I try to pull this up. I'll share my screen here. And keep me posted if the audio doesn't work. Let's give this a whirl.
I mean, the point is, my little talk in an hour here, I mean, I saw that, maybe you guys saw it, was a little, and you'll see it in the talk, it's like a 1-minute thing by this guy, Dana White, who's the UFC CEO guy. So he's talking to, he summed up, you're talking, Marcus, about it, he summed up in 1 minute exactly what you think, and probably why the people here feel like they do. Because he said, you know, he was talking to this guy, and he said, look, if I break my arm, I'm going to the doctor. If I need surgery, I'm going to the doctor. My general health, forget about it. The medical profession is full of shit. They don't know anything. So I thought to myself, there it is right there. I mean, we have to move away from, you know, this crazy medical system that is so expensive. America turns out to be number 44 on the list, you know, globally. We spend, you know, a year or two ago, it was $4.5 trillion. And I mean, if everyone was getting super healthy and we're at the top, but the fact is that in 2021, it seemed that for the first time in America, lifespan dropped 2.7 years. It's never happened before. And this was before COVID. It wasn't COVID. This was before COVID. And, you know, I think that that is where this tipping point was reached with the shit American diet, because it is the nutrition. And, you know, insulin resistance, meaning high sugars in insulin, is really the cause of all 80% of what we die from. And what's affecting all the guys in the military. I mean, I hear they're having a hell of a time just trying to find people that are reasonably fit that can even come in there. All these guys, I mean, half the world is fat, diabetic, and sick. America, 60% of people are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. I mean, this is the real pandemic. It's not COVID. It was a bullshit thing. But, I mean, that's the real issue, is the nutrition.
Totally.
And where are you going to get that? When you go to a most doctor, you know, you're there, but like you say, you only turn up when you're sick, you know. If I've got bronchitis here, he listens to you, gives you a couple of antibiotics, 6 minutes, and you're out the door. You know, why did you get the bronchitis in the first place? Might be the place to start, you know.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I've never even thought about that before meeting you. You know, I never would have thought, like, you get sick, you show up at the doctor, he gives you a Z-Pack or whatever, and you're gone. I mean, it's a complete shift in perspective. It's a system shifting thought process.
And, you know, people have asked me, you know, Graham, what's like your end game, right? And so, you know, my end game is really, I want to see healthcare democratized, because, you know what, it should be so inexpensive. You just need a little guidance, and you need a couple of things, because, you know, we were talking again to your boss there, and, you know, seeing is believing. You know, just like Jason here, he went along, he's done a great job in preventing himself, and he's probably going to do a lot better than I'll ever do. But the point is, he has been proactive in looking at his diet, taking a few essential supplements, very few drugs. And I mean, if you looked at his scan on his heart, because you have to see things for people to believe, you know, and that's the thing. It's like these sugar monitor things. You know, when you put a little sugar monitor and these guys see it, you know, it's a whole different thing. Then they've got a choice. You know, you can, if you do this, all your sugar disappears and you're normal, or you keep eating all this shit and you're going to die early.
Yeah, you can't ignore it.
Once you see it, you're like, are you going to do something about it? Or are you going to pretend it's not real?
Yeah.
So
Because it's
anyway,
real.
I think, and again, to the credit of your guy, he says, look, what can happen as well when enough guys, see, you go to your reunion, you see this guy, he looks like his biological age is reversed 10 years, and then you see this other guy, Christ, he looks like he's 15 years advanced. Then you start saying, well, Jesus, what are you doing? And then you start sharing that from people who you trust and believe in and you've shared bread with for many, many years. Then things start to shift a bit. But otherwise, it's a bit of an uphill.
I got a couple of questions that were sent to me. I didn't know if you wanted to go over some of those or you want to go somewhere else. It's all cool on my end. One of the questions was, which I thought it was an interesting thing, is, that I sort of trained in South Africa, and I was at Baragwanath Hospital, which was, and probably maybe still is, the biggest hospital in the world. and there were two questions in that. I think one was, what was it like practicing in an all black, in those days, this was before Mandela. So apartheid was very much there. So you had black hospitals and you had white hospitals. It was like a giant experiment. So I ended up doing my internship at Baragwanath Hospital. And to be honest, there were like 3,000 people in beds and another 1,000 in chairs and about 500 people under the beds. So, I mean, you had an incredible experience just because of the volume of, people, there. So I learned a lot there. And it was actually a hospital that was set up by General Jan Smuts, who was one of the presidents. He actually wrote a fascinating book called Holism and Evolution. He actually taught himself to read and write out of the family Bible. But he was one of the very interesting people. And if you look up the word holism in, say, the Encyclopedia Britannica, it's actually from Smuts's book on holism and evolution. But anyway, to give you an idea, one of the things that I learned there was that they were still dealing with some infectious disease, but chronic disease, it was very rare to see anyone have a heart attack. In fact, if we saw a black person have a heart attack, we'd usually write it up in the medical journal because, they weren't, succumbing to all this processed. I just got on your tail end about plastics. And I mean, these nanoplastics and macro, these microplastics and nanoplastics. I mean, I read an article the other day that most people, probably all of us listening on here, we've got a sandwich bag of plastic in our brains. And in fact, people with Alzheimer's have 10 plastic bags. But the interesting thing, in all the blacks, the Western disease was not there. No diverticulitis, no gallbladder, no heart attacks, no Alzheimer's, etc. So, the type of diabetes that was there was usually a type 1 diabetes, which, as you know, is less than 5% of people, but very sick, and ketoacidosis and things. But, a lot of the type 2 diabetes weren't there, except in the more urban. A lot of the rural blacks, were still eating a healthy sort of ancient diet. Just for the record, I think you guys would love to read Chris Kenobi's book on seed oils, because seed oils turn out to be probably more dangerous than sugar and grains combined. But, it was very, very interesting, as my internship year, in Baragwanath. But obviously coming to the States, I did internal medicine residency, emergency boarded in emergency medicine. And, the last 20 years I've been in anti-aging medicine, going upstream, to, not this reactive bullshit medicine, but moving into a proactive health, which should be inexpensive and easily available to anyone. And I suppose in my heart, I want to sort of help, democratizing healthcare with just there's a huge gap in the education that people have about, healthcare and things. So anyway, look, that's enough about me. But, I'm more than interested in to talk about, everything. I mean, the thing that's killing us here is obviously insulin resistance. 93% of the population now in America has some kind of metabolic abnormality. Only 7% have insulin sensitivity. So, I mean, this is the real thing that's fucking killing everyone. Raven, are you the gentleman that puts this thing together?
Yes, I'm one of the team members.
Oh,
And
okay.
Not here today, and Kevin is also from our team.
Okay, great. So I did send, I've written a dozen books, but the easy one is no one reads anymore. But the 4-week diabetes cure has got a lot of good information in there and remember, it's not the hyperglycemia that kills us, it's the hyperinsulinemia. So many people will have hyperinsulinemia for 10 or 15 years before their sugar pops up. Once their A1C goes up, anyone can diagnose it. But the trick is to find hyperinsulinemia early so you can mitigate a lot of the bad stuff that happens. But anyway, I don't know if Brett sent it to you, Raven, but the 4-week diabetes, I just sent you a PDF, but it's only 100 pages. So hopefully most people can get through it. But I think there's a lot of good information in those 100 pages.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for that. I think if you're okay with that, I can share it with the rest of the people in the call later.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share that with you guys.
Awesome.
And it does look like in the chat, Kevin had a question. Kevin, do you want to ask or did you? I can certainly read it out loud if you want. Up to you.
Sure, I can read it out loud if nobody else has something right away. On the topic of being pre-diabetic, my wife is pre-diabetic, but it seems that it's only refined flour, that like any breads or hamburger buns, but she can eat like ice cream and chocolate, typically like Kinder chocolate, and that she wears a monitor, and that really doesn't spike her. But it's the refined flour that's like a 0 to 100 spike. Do you have any thoughts on that, and the biology behind that?
Yeah, I think everyone is different. Some people might respond, and you have to be careful when she doesn't respond. I know I have a passion for Haagen-Dazs, but anyway, and I had a couple of sugar monitors, and I did it. I just tell you my own story. So I stuck my sugar monitor on, and I thought, well, shit, I love this Haagen-Dazs. Let me see what it does to me. So I ate it, and I didn't see much of it. And I thought, man, this sugar monitor can't be working. So I stuck another one on my other arm. And about 2 nights later, I ate another pint of Haagen-Dazs, and I didn't see much. But a buddy of mine said, Graham, you have to watch and look at the sugar a couple of hours later, which I really hadn't done. And, he was correct. You would see a slower rise in that sugar. But I mean, I was just last week, I had a sugar monitor. I went to my favorite little, where I shouldn't go, but a delicatessen type French little place. I had this innocuous looking like bun that I was eating there. And shit, while I was sitting there in the restaurant, I watched my sugar monitor. It was at a nice baseline 70, 75. And it went up to like 120 just while I was sitting there in about 45 minutes. So, I think, to be honest, those sugar monitors, and now I don't know what your wife's doing. You don't have to get them from the doctor, right? You can get a Lingo, over the counter, which, comes from the Abbott guys, or you can get a Stello from the Dexcom guys, and they both work very well. For $90, you've got a month's worth of monitoring. But, I do think one of the biggest things, insulin resistance comes from 3 things: too much sugar, fructose, too many grains, like with your wife, the flour and wheat and things, and then also these seed oils. Those are the 3 main things that give us insulin resistance. And remember, 62% of Americans are now diabetic or pre-diabetic. You have to get her A1C down. And remember, it's the high insulin, not the high sugar, that's killing her. Because eventually people, have this shit diet for 10, 15 years. And the insulin, if you ever bother to measure it, most doctors don't. But if you measure that and you look at the HOMA-IR, which is a very good test that you should do on your wife, or look at the triglyceride HDL ratio, or any of those, because you'll see what's happening. And then you have, you have that for a long time, and your sugar can still, your A1C can be normal. But then finally your pancreas gives out. And once that pancreas can't put out that insulin to keep things under control, then you see the A1C go up. But it's a late finding. We should be looking at, everyone should know, look, you don't die of cholesterol. It's all bullshit. I mean, the higher your cholesterol and the higher your LDL, the longer you live. It's the sugar. 100% of people having heart attacks have insulin resistance. Guaranteed. This was shown by Joseph Kraft, Dr. Stout, many years ago. The normal glucose tolerance test is wrong 50% of the time. You have to look at the insulin tolerance test. And that's what Joseph Kraft did in his little book, Epidemiology of Diabetes. Very important to read that. So, I think, a little intermittent fasting. I like a higher fat, lower carb diet. Now we've got the sugar diet that's out there. But anyway, that's short-lived. It's another one of the 500 fad diets. But anyway, so yes, why is it so important? Because insulin is incredibly inflammatory. All the chronic disease that you know of, heart attack, strokes, ED, Alzheimer's, diabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome, infertility. I mean, Christ, everything is related to insulin resistance. It is the pandemic of the 21st century. Heart attacks, I mean, a person dies or a person has a heart attack every 40 seconds in America. For 50% of people, the first sign of heart disease is sudden death. So, I mean, you need to, get a coronary calcium score. Your wife, because she's pre-diabetic, go and get a coronary calcium score. In Vegas here where I live, I'm in Ohio at the moment, but in Vegas, it's like $75. You don't even take off your shirt. You just go through the scanner. If you've got zero calcium in your coronaries, you're okay. 95% of the time you're fine. There are a small percent, and you should definitely get that done. All my guys with ED, they've all got diabetes. I mean, and remember, if you're having some erectile dysfunction, it's a canary in the coal mine, because remember, your coronary artery to your penis, at least your artery to your penis is a little smaller than the artery to your coronary artery. So you're warned if you're having, difficulty getting erections, that's low blood flow. And that's a warning that this guy's going to probably have a heart attack, or woman have a heart attack in the next couple of months. Or not months, but years, 3-4 years. It was well studied by the Italians to show that ED is a major risk factor, predictor of coronary artery disease. So you remember, you've got 60,000 miles of blood vessels in your body, and it's the inflammation that's coming from the insulin resistance. That's why diabetes is such an awful disease. You go blind, you have a stroke, you have a heart attack, you go into renal failure. Everyone on dialysis is all from sugar. So it's really the sugar. Forget about cholesterol. It's all bullshit.
Thank you.
Any other questions, guys?
Yes. I was wondering, what's your take on fasting protocols for women?
Yeah, I think that came up as a question. Look, women always have a tougher time with fasting for a couple of reasons. First of all, the hormonal cycle, is also somewhat sort of disruptive for women. And I know in general, women, it's difficult for a number of reasons. I mean, women also are much more prone to some stress and cortisol and things like that, which can make it more tricky. So guys tend to lose weight a lot easier with I like intermittent fasting, 16-8 hours, but I do know that, some of the gals have a tough time with the fasting. So I think everyone's a little different. Some gals do well. I mean, a lot of the people now are all doing, Ozempic, all these GLPs and Mounjaro and all these things. And why? I think about 50% of the population is going to be on these things because, they've shown now to be working in all these chronic diseases, which are all related to insulin resistance. So, they're using it for heart people, they're using it for Alzheimer people, they're using it for fat and diabetic people, obviously, and even sleep apnea and some of these things, kidney disease. It's everyone's, and they've got new GLPs coming down the pike quite quickly. So yeah, I think fasting in women a little more difficult. I know that a gal wrote a book about, that was really, keto and fasting works really well for all men. I would say only for about 30% of females.
So then I understand that it would be somewhat risky to do a monthly 24 hours fasting, for example.
I think it varies on the individual. I mean, going without food for 24 hours is not going to kill anyone, particularly here in America. You could probably go without food for a few months as long as you had water. So, I don't think it's going to kill anyone, a 24-hour fast. So, I wouldn't put it in the high risk category.
Also not for fertility.
Look, fertility is very much related to, too much fasting and, too much weight loss can absolutely, hurt you. But too much, look, PCOS is probably that's too much insulin and too much fat and sugar, I mean, polycystic ovarian syndrome is probably the major reason of infertility, and that is an insulin resistance disease. So, sometimes fasting, I know, and often a low thyroid can also interfere with women's fertility. So you should always do judicious fasting if they're overweight, and then, make sure you measure a T3, T4, TSH, and, check the thyroid.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I do have another question about earthing.
Yes.
I was curious to hear your perspective on earthing, because I keep hearing about it from different sources, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, a good friend of mine, he actually passed away just a year or two ago. His name was Dr. Stephen Sinatra. He was a cardiologist friend of mine from Connecticut, but he wrote the book Earthing with a guy, I think his name was Ochman or something, Ochman. They wrote a whole book on earthing. And, the problem is we have to get back to more our ancestral ways. Not too long ago, humans were outside most of the time, and they were walking often barefoot on the earth. So, earthing, with our rubberized shoes and everything, and the fact that we never get outside, a lot of bad things happen to us. We don't have the circadian rhythm from early infrared, sunlight in the early hours is the best thing that helps reset our circadian rhythm. I think, in the ocean, walking barefoot in the ocean or on the sand and, getting out and taking your shoes off, most of us never do that anymore. So I do think the earthing, there's a crazy guy, I sometimes listen to his podcast, a guy called Jack Kruse. But Jack Kruse is an interesting character, and he's very much about all this electromagnetic. And I think one of the questions was something about, how do you see electromagnetism in medical care? And this all has to do with the earthing, and all this is to do with that. And it was so funny when I was leaving from Vegas yesterday to fly here to Ohio. I got a book that was autographed by Bob Becker on the Body Electric, if any of you guys have heard of that book. But unfortunately, I'd lost it. So I just ordered another one from Amazon. And actually, as I walked out on the way to the airport, it was at my front door. So I picked it up and I reread some of it, on the plane. And Becker's work, I couldn't believe the date of his book. I couldn't believe it was 40 years. I mean, it was in 1985 that, Becker wrote his book. He was the guy that, used current to heal non-union bones and all that type of stuff. But, it's fascinating, his work. So, I think we've grossly underestimated the power of some of this electromagnetic sort of medicine. And the Russians were much more advanced, believe it or not, with a lot of the electromagnetic. And in fact, when I met with Becker for lunch, oh my God, that was probably in about 1980, I don't know, maybe 1990, I probably met with him. But he was telling me about even how the potential difference between inside the cell and outside, how that potential is maintained is from, geomagnetic pulsations and, these sunspots and all these things have direct effects. And now with the natural, background of this, we've got all this abnormal EMF now. All these radios, microwaves, 5G, I mean, Christ, all this stuff. And these things definitely affect our mitochondria and other things like that. And, I think earthing can mitigate, some of that stuff as well. So I do think, I'm sorry I didn't spend more time with Steve because he was a cardiologist who was very aware of the benefits of earthing. So I would look for his book on earthing if you're interested in that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I had a few questions.
Yeah, shoot.
So the first one would be, what is the actual impact of CoQ10 on young mitochondria? Like, is there any real impact for young people, or it's just a fad?
No, listen, look, the mitochondria is the key for longevity. And you have to understand how this works. So I'll give you 5 minutes. Look, by the way, if you want a good CoQ10, use MitoQ. It's the most probably published product ever. They've got over 500 articles. It comes from New Zealand. They've got a particularly good type of ubiquinol that will really help anyone on a statin or anything like that, because the statins, as you know, deplete a lot of the CoQ10. But let me just tell you something that's very important. Maybe you guys know this, maybe you don't. But here's, in my last book on Live Beyond 100, there's guys around. There's this guy, Carlos Lopez Oten, in 2013, he wrote about the 9 hallmarks of aging, and about a year and a half ago, he added another 3. But these 12 hallmarks of aging, many of you have heard of them, like autophagy or telomere shortening and all this kind of thing. But in my book in last year, I basically divided them up into 4 primary hallmarks. And this is very important because 4 of the hallmarks, this is how it goes. Nutrition is the most important thing because everything you put in your mouth, food or water, it's information to the body. What happens next? The nutrient sensing that happens, and that's all about the mTOR and AMPK, and I won't get into all that. But anyway, what happens? That will set up your microbiome. And remember, you're only 30% human. 70% of the cells in your body, you've got 10 times as many cells in your body that are actually bugs. So your microbiome is critical. We know all autoimmune disease is coming from dysbiosis and a screwed up leaky gut and all this type of thing. So what happens? So the nutrient sensing determines your microbiome. Now your microbiome, and here's the important thing I want you guys to think about. Your microbiome has had a relationship with your mitochondria for 2 billion, not million, 2 billion years. So remember, your mitochondria are also bugs. They come from your mother. All your human cells have got DNA from your mother and your father. Your mitochondria comes from your mom. So what's happened, and this comes from a very good article in 2024, if you want to look it up, it's Professor Michael Murphy from Cambridge in the UK. He puts forward the theory, which I believe 100%, was that we have broken why our lifespan fell 2 years and actually 3 months before 2020, before COVID, is because we've basically broken a 2 billion year relationship between our microbiome and our mitochondria. Remember, the mitochondria, besides making nearly 100 pounds of energy in each of us every day, are actually the major signaling molecules in our body. So what's happened, we've actually broken this relationship between the bugs in our gut and the mitochondria, which are bugs. The bugs in our gut and the mitochondria talk to each other 24/7. And the mitochondria are also, besides being the powerhouses, they are the most important signaling molecules in the body. and they work on the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. And all the inflammation that we see in chronic disease, all the inflammation we see comes from the mitochondria. So it's critically important to keep our mitochondria healthy. And obviously high uric acid coming from, high sugars, diets and things, insulin resistance, they poison the mitochondria big time. So you want to live long, you need the mitochondria. And obviously MitoQ, a lot of people with, there are obviously genetic abnormalities in the mitochondria, in the chain, in the electron transport chain, but that's a small group, maybe 1 in 5 or 10,000 people. But there are a lot of acquired mitochondrial deficiencies, heavy metals, microplastic, insulin, all these things really hurt our mitochondria. And remember, resistance exercise, one of the major ways you can combat and improve your mitochondrial function. So, diet, fasting, all these hormesis effects, fasting, feasting, hot, cold plunges, you hear all about infrared, all this stuff. These are all hormetic effects that stimulate the mitochondria. And you remember Nietzsche wrote, what doesn't kill me, makes me healthier. That's kind of what's happening with all these hormetic effects with mitochondria.
What about methylene? Does that have any impact in fixing?
Who's that? Metformin?
Methylene blue. Methylene blue.
Oh, methylene blue. Yeah, look, methylene blue, it does a lot of things, to increase electron flow in the electron transport chain. It basically increases ATP production, which is obviously the energy currency, lowers oxidative stress, and it also improves mitochondrial biogenesis. So methylene blue will drive, more new mitochondria being generated. So, absolutely it can do, all those things. It's one of many things. I mean, there are a lot of peptides, a lot of these things, MOTC, SS31, BAM, there are a lot of things that drive. You have to be a little judicious. You can't just throw the whole kitchen sink at them. But, there's nothing like good sleep, good exercise, good food, healthy food. These things all optimize our mitochondria.
If, let's say, like our normal lives, it's very hard to avoid seed oils. Right? Like most of the restaurants, they use seed oils, and we can't really regulate what we eat all the time. Like even if 80% of the time we try to control everything that we eat, once in a while you go out with your friends and family, and then you eat out in restaurants. You don't really.
But Raven, I tell you what you do. I do it myself now. I've got a couple of favorite restaurants I go to. Obviously, avoid all these fast foods because they cook with all the shit oils. You don't know how long it's been sitting there. But, I go to a restaurant and they know me and I say, listen, just cook my steak in butter. Don't give me any, and if you're going to do some sauteed vegetables, I don't want any bullshit, oils, just put a little butter on them, I'm fine. So yes, you have to be, it's difficult, but remember, even these things like, you think you're eating a healthy protein bar, it's full of bloody seed oils. I mean, they're in everything. And maybe Brett, I'll send Brett my, there was a very good guy, this guy, I think I mentioned, Chris Kenobi, Dr. Chris Kenobi. He wrote I think the best book. And what I did was about 300 pages. So what I did, I summarized the main points in 30 pages. But seed oils are particularly toxic to the mitochondria. And in fact, in the article, which is about 30 pages, I must say most of it came from Kenobi. But I'll send it to Brett, and Brett can send to your guys and gals, because I do think seed oils, there was no heart disease in the early 1900s, not because it wasn't diagnosed, but very little. I think the first heart attack ever described in America was in 1910. But it was in 1900 that people started adding all these bloody bullshit oils. So they are very, very toxic. You should only cook with, butter or ghee or things like avocado oil, beef fat. Do not cook with any of these plant oils. They are very, very toxic. It's the only time your cholesterol gets dangerous, because it oxidizes the LDL. Because to be honest, cholesterol is a non-entity. The higher it is, including your LDL, the longer you live.
This includes also olive oil.
Yeah, you cannot cook with olive oil. Olive oil is fantastic cold. Put it on your salads. You can drink it by the tablespoon, no problem. But you cannot cook an egg in a pan with olive oil. It's got a different smoke point. Yeah.
So we should stick to like beef tallow, stuff like that mostly.
Yeah, absolutely. Do not cook with any canola, safflower, olive oil. Don't do that. So,
Even
yeah.
avocado oil or like MCT.
Avocado oil is fine. Coconut oil, fine. Ghee, fine.
What about mustard oil?
I don't know about mustard oil. I don't use it, but you have to be very careful. And Kenobi, I think in his book, he gives lists of some, and also nuts. Macadamia nuts happen to be the most healthy nut, because in a lot of these oils, it's the linoleic acid that does the damage in the mitochondria. So he's got nice lists, and you can actually see all the chronic disease. He's got fantastic graphs and things. You can see that all these diseases, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, they all rise with the increase in seed oils.
Is there anything that we can do to detox these seed oils? Because most of us, like for decades, we've been just accumulating seed oils. And what can we do to like get rid of them from our body for good?
Kenobi shows in his book, and I write some of these things. Obviously, the first thing is to stop putting it into your body as best you can. But, he's got a lot of things where you have to get your meat from proper meat supplies, because remember, most of the cattle where they've fed all the soy and all these other things, also your eggs, you have to get them from clean. And he shows you the difference. One thing which was interesting in his book, he showed that, for instance, if you eat cows, they've got 4 stomachs. And this linoleic acid, which is the bad thing in all these seed oils, is actually detoxed by one of the stomach. So you don't have to get your steaks necessarily, grass-fed. Because if you're getting pork or you get chicken, they've only got one stomach. So it doesn't detox the linoleic acid that they're getting in their food supply. So you don't have to run out. And by the way, I mean, when you eat just regular steaks, they taste a hell of a lot better than the bloody grass-fed steaks, if you haven't noticed. But you're okay with steaks. But if you're going to eat pork or chicken or something like that, you want to get stuff off a farm that, these things are well done. The bigger problem that I don't know if you've seen, and I'll send this to Brett that he could send to you, but these forever chemicals that are coming like from Teflon related products and things. I mean, these are the things that I can promise you, every listener on this thing, your podcast here, you've all got these forever chemicals. I have them in my body as well. You can test that, and that's the thing you have to watch. That's why you want to get a water filter into into your house. You have to be careful about these forever chemicals. Where I am in Ohio, a lot of this stuff was discovered by a farmer who was right next to a DuPont landfill, and all this bad toxic shit was going into the water. And he had 123 of his cows die from this polluted water. And he engaged an attorney, and they finally settled for an undisclosed amount of money. But that's really what that sparked this whole interest. And there's a great video, which I just recently watched, which my youngest son sent me, about these forever chemicals. And these things, it's not just the seed oils, it's these forever chemicals. There's all these other pollutants, Roundup in wheat and all these things. I mean, it's slowly killing us, and I'm sure it contributes. All these frankenfoods, 74% of calories now consumed by Americans are ultra processed, not just processed, ultra processed. And so, I mean, this is what's killing everyone. Why do you think 93% of Americans have abnormal metabolic function? I mean, we have to do the best we can. Like I'm sure you were talking about these microplastics, but man, it's they're in everything.
For young people, is there any need to take metformin, or something like berberine can suffice for people who are in their late 20s?
Yeah, I mean, I like berberine. If you look up the literature between metformin and berberine, you actually find that berberine works better and has pretty much no side effects. So I'm a big fan of berberine. In fact, I make a product which is dihydroberberine, which is 6 times more absorbable, because you usually have to take quite a few pills of regular berberine. But dihydroberberine is 6 times more absorbable. So I like that product, and we've also added some mitochondrial things in it. But look, just buying the regular at Amazon, I'm not promoting my product or anything, but you can buy regular berberine. I think it's good. I mean, I think it increases AMPK, so it lowers your sugar, it lowers your insulin. I mean, it does a lot of good things. Look, with a person who's got diabetes, I mean, or pre-diabetes, I mean, the book that I sent to Brett should, there's 100 pages in there. Every single page has got an important thing a diabetic needs to do, or pre-diabetic. All of us, actually. I mean, that's why I sent it. It's a skinnier book. It's only about 100 pages. Like I said, no one reads anymore anyway, so I have to shorten these things. But there's a lot of good information in there. And I mean, it's not just taking metformin or, you'd also asked, I think, in the thing about Taxig, one of these dapagliflozin. There are a lot of them. There's Invokana, there's Jardiance. These are, SGLT, these are basically blockers. And they all work by increasing, not absorbing the sugar back. So you excrete more sugar in the urine. And yes, there are some problems. You can get a necrotizing sort of fasciitis, and you can get fungal infections because you've got more sugar in your groin area there. So, there are complications, and I wouldn't advise that. I mean, I think, most of us, the book that I sent you is called The 4-Week Diabetes Cure. I mean, obviously 95% of people have type 2 diabetes. And I mean, I can reverse most diabetes in several weeks, provided the person follows, what's in that book. You don't even need me. You just follow the book and implement it, and you'll be fine. So that's what you really need to do. There's no one pill that's suddenly going to make your diabetes and things go away. So, and for a lot of people as well, a lot of adults, once they go through andropause or menopause, the hormones are screwed up. Testosterone is a very important replacement in, middle-aged males, because it lowers it takes your sugar out of your blood into your muscles where you can burn it off. And it does a lot of other good things. So, hormonal function, sleep, bad sleep gives you more cortisol, more noradrenaline, higher sugars. So, exercise, tremendously important. The single best lifestyle thing for your mitochondria. Because remember, the sugar and the high uric acid that comes from the sugar, you only get uric acid from 3 things. You get it from too much fructose, and you get it from alcohol, and you get it from too much proteins, too much purines. But that's very unusual. It's mostly coming from 90% from the sugar. But uric acid is a secondary, Raven, when he talked about metabolic syndrome and the 5 things, he had uric acid as also a very high marker for disease. So a uric acid in a woman should be less than 3 in a woman less than 4.5, in a man less than 3.5. So uric acid is, again, a marker for, metabolic abnormalities. It poisons the mitochondria, both insulin and uric acid. Raven, what we'll do, we'll get Brett to send you he's sending you guys the 4-week diabetes cure, and I'll also ask him to please send you the Chris Kenobi's book on seed oils. I mean, it's really worth reading. It's only about 30 pages, and I can't claim it as my own. It's mostly, I would say, 85% coming from Kenobi, but it's very important information that everyone should know. And I'll also send you what my son sent me, which is this Forever Chemicals. But I think you've got, with the sugar book, with the seed oil books, and with these Forever Chemicals, you're going to have a lot of good information for all your guys and gals.
Also, you can send us the link for the berberine product that you came up with. That would be great too, because a lot of us are running some berberine experiments. I think so far, me, Porus, 3 of us. In the other 2 are not here today, but all 3 of us had like amazing results.
Yeah, no, I think berberine is great. So yeah, in the product, I call it Magnificent 7. It's on you can order it just off eternitymedicinerx.com, but I'll get Brett to send you that. That's my private practice. But the eternitymedicinerx.com, the product you want is Magnificent 7. It's got 3 products that lower sugar and 4 products that enhance mitochondrial biogenesis. So it's a really, really good product.
Yep, I have the link here for you guys.
Yeah. So yeah, just we'll get it all to you, no problem.
Thanks a lot, Doc. Does anybody else have any questions? I think Chris raised his hand a while ago. Tasneem is also raising her hand. I think if Chris doesn't.
I was just, yeah, go ahead. I didn't have a question.
I think okay. I think she's okay.
Yeah. I want to ask, what is like the major difference between metformin alone and a combination of therapies like dapagliflozin plus metformin for type 2 diabetes management?
Yeah, I mean, the SGL2 blockers, I mean, I use them if a person, first of all, diabetes type 2 is completely reversible, provided a person fixes their diet primarily, and the other things that's written in my 4-week diabetes cure. It's very rare that I have to use an SGLT2. I mean, I use the GLP-1 long before I use an SGLT. There are side effects, including death from the SGLT. So I never like to use something that could kill someone. And particularly 90% of my diabetics get better with just what's in my 4-week diabetes cure. It's not rocket scientists. I mean, you go to a regular doctor, I mean, shit, they want to keep you on drugs for the rest of your life. It's absolute bullshit. And the other thing is your body fat. Your body fat is very important. Your BMI and your weight mean nothing. You want to know how much fat, a man should not be more than 20% fat. A woman, because they got boobs and their fat distribution in their hips and thighs, they can be up to 28%. But when I was in India, I was shocked. I had these young little girls. I mean, they're 30 years old and they look like a little thin little wisp of a girl that the wind could blow them over. And I put them on a body fat scale. And Jesus, they had like 36%, 38% body fat. Those are the skinny fat, what we call TOFIs, thin on the outside but fat on the inside. They are even more at risk than the fat metabolic syndrome types that you all know about. So, body fat, forget your weight, your BMI is all bullshit. You have to see how much fat is on your body. And listen, don't go into SGLT, these things, they are not the first line drugs for diabetes. The first thing is lifestyle change. Metformin, berberine, these are harmless things. And then, there are other things you can use as well. GLPs, I mean, they've been used now, and you're going to see half of America is going to be on these bloody things in the next few years. Not that I think it's great to jumpstart people, and I'll use it for a few months. Again, I'm much more about lifestyle than giving any bullshit drugs from the pharma. The big pharma is killing everyone. They're the 3rd leading cause of death. That's published in the American, Journal of Medicine. I mean, JAMA. Journal of American Medical. There's heart disease, cancer, and doctors. I mean, not doctors, but, well, doctors are prescribing the medication, but so it is doctors and pharmacy. I mean, you have to think twice. One Z-Pack will screw up your microbiome sometimes for up to 2 years. And most of the people that are taking this shit, it's for a little viral illness, which is not going to respond anyway. So be very careful. I would think twice before I got handed anybody drug from any doctor. This is big pharma. They have stolen medicine. You can probably see I'm quite excited about that stuff, so I apologize. But I tell you, be very careful. I think the average person now meeting an average doctor is going to be made worse 50% of the time.
I actually personally experienced this. Like some of the questions I was asking was based on what I saw in my dad's experience, and he's a liver cancer patient. And once I actually studied about the medicines that his diabetic doctor gave him, I saw that one of the medicines, it actually is bad for liver cancer. So what I was wondering is, the diabetic doctor, doesn't he really like see the details of the patient before giving
No,
him?
he doesn't. He doesn't. He's got 6 minutes with your father, in and out, and off he goes with a handful of medication. Listen, a very good book on cancer is the one by Nasha Winters called Cancer is a Metabolic Disease. She's got 10 hallmarks of thing. It's a more natural approach to cancer. And remember, you know, Otto Warburg got a Nobel Prize in 1932 for showing that cancer is very much related to high sugar. Cancer cells are ravenous for sugar. They're 80 times more ravenous for sugar than other cells in your body. So Nasha, Nasha Winters' book, it's based on Otto Warburg's information, but it's a very good book on the natural approach. I mean, the chemotherapies, I mean, there are a few, younger kids with cancers usually do quite well with lymphomas and leukemias. It's a different type of disease, but what's happening is that even the Surgeon General said this last year. I mean, cancer used to only start at age 64. That was the peak. Now it's in people under 50. And it's really largely because of the shit diet and too much alcohol. Moderate drinking now has been shown it's not 1 or 2 drinks a night, it's 1 or 2 drinks a week. So a combination of our shit diet, the increasing pollution in the environment, all these forever chemicals, alcohol, there's no safe limit of alcohol. So these are the things that provoke cancer, but particularly the American diet. I mean, it's a recipe for cancer. I mean, that's why heart disease and cancer are that kills most of the people in the country.